I caught my wife cheating with our grandson's friend, uncovered lies, and recorded the shocking truth. For 40 years, I believed I was part of a perfect marriage. At 64, I had a loving wife. 62, two wonderful daughters, and three amazing grandchildren. We were not just partners, but best friends, soulmates, even. Our bond seemed unshakable, something younger couples often admired. So, what could possibly go wrong? One Saturday started like any other, full of promise. The sun was shining, and I was eagerly heading out for my weekly golf game, a cherished break from routine. But as I drove toward the course, I realized I'd forgotten my golf club repair tool. Annoyed but determined to retrieve it, I turned back home, never imagining the shock awaiting me. When I arrived, I noticed Victor, my grandson's 19-year-old friend, lingering at the front door. He'd helped us with odd jobs before, but seeing him again so soon after his last visit felt strange. Curious but unsuspecting, I stepped inside and froze. There, in the living room, was my wife dressed in nothing but her undergarments. Victor was shirtless, emerging from the bathroom. Their startled expressions said it all. The scene didn't require further explanation. I confronted them, demanding to know what was going on. My wife quickly claimed she'd asked Victor to clean the pool, but her excuse didn't add up. The pool had been cleaned just the day before. Her defensive tone, the awkward body language, and Victor's pale, guilty face only confirmed my suspicions. I told Victor to leave immediately and warned him never to return. My wife protested, calling me paranoid and even suggesting I was losing my mind. She tried to shift the blame, saying I was overreacting and reading too much into an innocent situation. But the pieces didn't fit. Why was she wearing a revealing outfit to sunbathe on a cool day? Why hadn't she mentioned Victor's visit beforehand? The more I pressed, the more she deflected, even threatening to involve our children and grandson to paint me as unreasonable. For days, I wrestled with doubt and denial. I replayed the scene over and over, questioning if I'd missed signs earlier in our marriage. Memories surfaced, subtle red flags I'd ignored in my naive belief in her decency. Our arguments escalated, and she turned our children against me, portraying me as irrational. I felt isolated, helpless. My mental health began to deteriorate as anxiety consumed me. The love I thought we shared now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. This revelation forced me to confront the truth. My marriage had been built on lies. Seeking clarity, I began attending therapy, uncovering years of manipulation I hadn't recognized before. Slowly, I started rebuilding my sense of self, determined not to let her betrayal define my future. This painful experience taught me to trust my intuition and value my own worth. Though the road ahead is uncertain, I'm committed to healing and finding peace, even if it means leaving behind the life I once believed was perfect. When my therapist first introduced me to mindfulness, I struggled to grasp its essence. Despite my efforts, I couldn't master being present in the moment. Meanwhile, I avoided addressing a deeper issue, my wife's infidelity. Eventually, the burden became too heavy to bear. Summoning my courage, I confronted her about a betrayal from years ago. Her reaction was shocking, complete denial. She dismissed my accusations as nonsense and tried to shift blame, but her refusal to admit the truth only widened the chasm between us. As tension grew, I reached my breaking point. Overwhelmed by emotion, I collapsed in tears, unable to speak or breathe easily. For the first time, my vulnerability took her by surprise. She knelt beside me, holding me tightly, but still denied any wrongdoing. She insisted she didn't understand my pain and feared I would leave her without cause. Despite her reassurances, I remained skeptical. Our discussions uncovered glaring discrepancies in our recollections of events, moments I remembered vividly. She seemed to barely recall. A part of me suspected she was assessing how much I truly knew, cautiously avoiding a full confession. Her closest admission came when she suggested meeting with my psychologist, implying that sharing everything might change how I saw her. It left me wondering, could the truth be worse than the torment my imagination had already created? Desperate for clarity, I decided to investigate. I reached out to a former best friend I suspected of being involved in her betrayal. We hadn't spoken in over 20 years, but I managed to get his number. With trembling hands, I dialed, my heart pounding as I braced for answers. When he picked up, his voice was familiar but wary. After some hesitant pleasantries, I asked if he remembered Anna, my wife. A pause followed, and I revealed the devastating truth. Anna had passed away the night before. The lie was deliberate, meant to disarm him. I then shared Anna's supposed confession about their infidelity. His sharp intake of breath confirmed my suspicions. Overwhelmed, he broke down and admitted everything: his betrayal, his regret, and the guilt that had haunted him for decades. I recorded every word. With the proof in hand, I played it for my wife. Her face fell as the truth unraveled. She could no longer deny her actions. Through tears, she begged me not to share the recording with our children and confessed to other affairs. We struck a deal. I would keep her secrets in exchange for full transparency. But even as we tried to navigate this storm, I knew our decades-long marriage was over. The lies had eroded everything we had built. Despite her pleas, I proposed a separation to reflect on our lives. When I later shared the recording with our children, they saw her in a new light. Her attempts to paint me as paranoid crumbled under the weight of the truth. Still, she fought to protect her image, demanding an amicable divorce that would place the blame on me. I refused. In the end, we divorced. I sold our home and began a new chapter, traveling the world with the support of my children. Meanwhile, Anna's life unraveled. Overcome with shame, she descended into depression and suffered a stroke, leaving her paralyzed. Despite everything, I feel no triumph, only a sense of closure. Life is too short to be spent in the shadow of betrayal. Now, I focus on building a legacy of love and honesty for my children, cherishing the years I have left. As I calmed myself after yet another surge of anger, I stared at the phone in my hand, its screen dark, reflecting the tense expression on my face. My pulse began to steady. I returned to the call and addressed Amy, my sister-in-law. "Amy, why did you invite him to the hospice?" Her voice, calm but slightly defensive, came through the receiver. "I didn't exactly invite him," she admitted. "Elaine wanted him there, and I tried to discourage her, but you know how stubborn she can be." The name alone him was enough to stir the rage I'd been suppressing for days. Trevor. His presence in my life had always been a shadow I couldn't escape. And now Elaine was insisting on dragging him into what was supposed to be a sacred moment. "What does she want from this, Amy?" I asked, exasperated. Amy hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. Elaine says it's important for all of us to be there for Susie's sake." I froze at the mention of my daughter's name. It felt like a betrayal, even hearing Susie associated with him. "Susie has no part in this," I said firmly. Amy sighed. "She's 3, and Elaine said it wouldn't be appropriate to have her there for this discussion. That's why I suggested you drop her off with Mom and Dad before we head to the hospice." Her suggestion made sense, but my apprehension remained. Susie was my anchor in the chaos Elaine had brought into my life. Letting her out of my sight, even for a few hours, felt like surrendering a part of myself. Reluctantly, I agreed. Fine, I'll take Susie to her grandparents' house. But, Amy, this better not turn into some circus sideshow. When we arrived at the hospice, the air was heavy with that peculiar mix of antiseptic and blooming flowers. Cindy, one of the kindest nurses there, greeted us warmly. Her smile carried a sense of compassion that momentarily eased my anxiety. Elaine's having a good day, Cindy said, her voice soft. She's been using her morphine pump less today. She's lucid and looking forward to seeing you. Amy squeezed my shoulder reassuringly as we followed Cindy down the quiet hallway. The weight of the moment grew heavier with each step. Elaine's room was at the end of the corridor, bathed in soft natural light from the large window that overlooked the hospice's serene garden. When we entered, my stomach clenched. There he was, Trevor, seated by the headboard, his presence contaminating the tranquil space. Elaine's face lit up when she saw me. Despite everything, she still looked beautiful, though her features were pale and thin from the toll of her illness. She greeted me with an outstretched hand. I couldn't bring myself to kiss her, so I settled for a brief handshake and took a seat beside Amy, directly across from Trevor. Elaine began with a forced smile. Thank you both for coming. I know this is awkward, but I think we all agree that we want what's best for Susie. I nodded curtly. Susie's well-being has always been my priority. My gaze shifted to Trevor, my tone hardening. What I don't understand is why he's here. Elaine glanced at Trevor, then back at me, hesitating before answering. It's complicated, she began, her voice quivering. But first, I want to thank you, both of you, for standing by me through everything. I folded my arms, waiting for her to get to the point. Elaine continued, turning her attention to Amy. Amy, you've always been an incredible big sister. You've been my rock through the toughest moments, especially when we were trying to conceive. You held my hand through the testing, the treatments, everything. You're a hero to me and to Susie. I hope you'll keep loving her as much as you do now. Her words sounded genuine, but I couldn't ignore the unease building inside me. And then she turned to me. I owe you so much too, she said. You've been my strength, even when I didn't deserve it. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand why things happened the way they did. My patience wore thin. Why did you cheat, Elaine? I demanded, my voice sharp. Elaine winced, but didn't shy away from the question. I was desperate, she confessed. The infertility treatments were taking a toll on me, on us. I felt like I was failing as a woman and as a wife. One day, during lunch, I broke down. Trevor's office was next door, and he saw me crying. He comforted me. The bitterness in my laugh surprised even me. Comforted you? That's what you call it. Elaine nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. It started as friendship, but it grew into something more. I was so focused on having a baby that I made choices I'm not proud of. But I never stopped loving you. Her words felt hollow, like a fragile mask trying to hide the betrayal beneath. I stayed with you because I believed in us, I said, my voice cold. Not because I was okay with what you did. Elaine looked down, visibly shaken. I know, she whispered. And that's why I'm asking for one last favor. My jaw tightened. What favor? I want Trevor to have joint custody of Susie after I'm gone, Elaine said, her voice trembling. Time seemed to freeze. The room fell into a deafening silence as her words sank in. No, I said, the word escaping my lips before I could even process it fully. Elaine's eyes widened. Please, just hear me out. Absolutely not, I interrupted. You expect me to share custody of my daughter with the man you cheated on me with? Are you out of your mind? Elaine's composure cracked, and she began to cry. Susie isn't biologically yours, she blurted out. The world tilted beneath me. What? I whispered, barely able to speak. Elaine wiped her tears. When we did IVF, I asked Amy to use Trevor's sample instead of yours. I thought we could have one baby with him and another with you later on. But then I got sick, and we never got that chance. I turned to Amy, my voice trembling with anger and desperation. Is this true? Amy hesitated before shaking her head firmly. No, it's not true. Elaine stared at her, stunned. Amy, don't. Amy cut her off. Elaine, stop lying. I refused to use Trevor's sample. It was immoral, and I wasn't going to betray my brother like that. She turned to me, her voice steady. Susie is biologically yours. Elaine gasped, her shock evident. No, that's not possible. Amy's expression hardened. It is. And there's something else you need to know. The eggs we used for IVF weren't yours. They were mine. The weight of Amy's words hit like a freight train. What? I asked, barely able to comprehend. Amy's voice softened. When Elaine's egg reserve tests came back poor, I volunteered to donate my eggs. I did it for you and for Susie. After Elaine passes, we can give Susie the family she deserves. Elaine's composure crumbled completely. You planned this? No, Amy said firmly. But we've had enough of your lies and manipulation. Trevor will have no claim to Susie. You made your choices, Elaine. Now it's time to live with them. Elaine sobbed uncontrollably, but I felt no pity. Instead, I turned to her, my voice filled with years of suppressed anger and heartbreak. You betrayed me, Elaine, but Susie is my daughter, and I will protect her from the chaos you created. You can spend your remaining days bitter and angry, or you can choose to leave behind a legacy of love and redemption. The choice is yours. Amy added, her voice gentle but firm. Think of Susie. What kind of mother do you want her to remember? Elaine didn't respond, her cries the only sound in the room. The serene garden outside the window seemed almost mocking in its peace. As I left the hospice that day, I knew one thing for certain. Susie would grow up surrounded by love and honesty. The tangled web Elaine had spun would not define her future or ours.